Greetings. Welcome to Wombs, Wells, and Waterways with your host, Shahida. I'm here to just add some clarity around topics that concern central themes that you will find on my site and in my um, delivery of certain information is this idea around waterways. And I thought it would be great to talk about what that means and how I just realized sometimes there can be some expectation or unknown expectation of what that means, waterways, and what that means for the general researcher or family historian in documenting their family's history or community's history. And so inside of that idea, I often come from, and you've seen me talk about, if you've seen me before, I've talked about this idea of developing um, connections that I've come across and just knowing my own family background through South Carolina, coastal regions of South Carolina, and how that has been a central piece in me going further and digging deeper into maritime history and culture. And so, what is not always most obvious thing and what is put on the front page is that often a lot of historical data around maritime culture and history is centered around larger bodies of water. So there is a more formal name um, description of that, but it's essentially it tracks things that involve from one country to another, more so than just looking at so Atlantic Ocean, the Indian Ocean, things that cross oceanic bodies of water is often the focus. And sometimes we can also fall into those kinds of categorical ways of seeing if we really need to do this thing or really need to really pay attention to that thing. And I'm saying, wait, don't discount the waterways. And so I'll talk a little bit about what that means and go through a key example in a short period of time, just a short period. And so what I want to explain is that just because regions are coastal, it does not mean that that is the only way that people connected to the water. And that might be pretty obvious, but sometimes from a research perspective, we discount it, document and document sets that could actually inform us a little bit more about our journey. So here's one thing. So if I take my family's connection, like my family is rooted in the coastal region of South Carolina. Um, the Gullah Geechee corridor. We're looking at areas that are surrounded by oceanic bodies of water. And we're also seeing that they may have a slightly different lifestyle and way of doing things that's very different from some communities that would have been more inland. That could be very much true. And in fact, in most cases it is, but it does not eliminate the possibilities and the connection to water. And I think what is not always clear is that there always has to be a connection to water. I think they let that sink in. There always, water is not a maybe, it's a requirement. If we think about it from our own bodies, of what our own bodies need, it's also needed in the commerce, the development, the sustainability of life, right? And so whether it's drinking water, commuting water, um, fishing water, we're in need of that. And so we don't want to lose that lens. And so I'm here to like hammer that into everyone who's in that space and to really focus on not lose sight and also bring that into focus with your work. So what I want to say about those coastal regions is they do have unique things. So when you're researching and you see census records and things that may come up as a laborer, well, was that laborer living in a coastal region in proximity to a waterway? Then that labor could be a shipbuilder. It could be um, actually not just a fisherman, but someone who is transporting and trading in that way. And may be more mobile so that they are actually transporting the goods because that is the quote unquote labor of that area and that time. And so keep that in mind. Now, let's move inland a little bit into places that people are like, well, I'm not really on the coast. I live inland. And I don't know many places that are just, even if you're in a very mountainous area, you are going to come across a waterway. And that waterway will be a centerpiece for the communities that are around it. If that's the nearest waterway, then you better believe that there's some mechanism that allows them to travel to and from that waterway. And so what may be different in if we even look at plantation life, that there may be plantations that are further inland that are participating in that flow of movement of reliance to not just the coastal waters but waterways in addition to more generally speaking water bodies of water that they are may or may not need to be directly moving with that theme, right? So they may be more stationary, but they're still working in that space and utilizing that and connecting with people that are using that space in that more mobile way. So that's on the coastal region. But what I want to bring our attention to is this concept of waterways. When we're thinking about waterways, we also want to think about it by first posing the question, like, is there a waterway that's near here? And if so, what is the waterway that we can name? And if you have to use Google Maps in the beginning to just really get a more physical range of a visual, spatial um, contact of where things are in present day, didn't start there, right? But maps change over time. And also, and I will do, but it's just a matter of when I'll do it. But coming down the line, we can do a little bit more work on reading these very like amazing maps. As you go further back, what happens is you start to notice maps are just another perspective on land and water. And some of these waterways, and I've seen it back going back to the 1700s, and maybe even earlier, but definitely in the 1700s, 1800s, I see wills where people have in their will, like they have been deeded some part of a waterway. I didn't know you can own parts of it. So that was a learning moment for me. And then, like, if there's not, some of the labor from enslaved labor came to build canals, right? So if there wasn't a waterway, then they were trying to make one. Like, we need to create this passageway here. And so you see that in many parts of the world. And so that there goes that occupation, just a laborer. We need to add more definition to those things and look for those definitions. And we can find those by understanding what is in the environment. So as we go further into looking at waterways, we want to see them as connectors, as community connectors, and that even though you might be in the most inland place, there's no way my ancestors were near the ocean. your waterways lead to another waterway, which lead to another waterway. And what you want to eventually start to do is look at the line on your map, like where the rivers are traveling, and look at the towns that are adjacent to it. How are they moving along? And it will make sense if you follow more sense if you follow the waterways than if you simply stay on present day land maps. And as we start to look at maps and other video explanations, is just that we if your only maps you looked at are written in English, you know who's writing them or translating them, right? And so you want to start to look at maps from other people's perspective. It gives you ideas about how people were viewing the same areas of land during across different time periods, and also that merge on one specific time period. So I wanted to show an example of some of the work that I'm doing, and this would be very quick. So I'm not going to do too much of um that this is the wrong share. But let me get to the right page. There we go. Yeah, that's good. Safari. I think we got it. Okay, so we're here with our map. And as we're starting to look a little bit more closely at it, this is, let me see if we can see where we are. Maybe I need to zoom out a little bit more. So just to give so that you can see the states. So where we are in this map and where we're going to focus is just kind of give you a tidbit of some of the areas that I've been looking at recently. So we have Pennsylvania, we have New York State, not to be confused with New York City, right? Which is more on the coastal side. And I'm just trying to say, so, this is New York City down here. We really want to just look at the waterways for this example, okay? So I'm making sure to stay clear of the most popular idea of what we think when we think of waterways. So there's that. And then there's the regions and areas that I think um, really flow into this concept of how we can better research our family, knowing what we know about just the existence and to be aware of waterways in very realistic terms. So this particular map, and it's not accurate, this is just for example purposes. It's saying that it's reading with the time period of 1830 in mind. And so take that with a grain of salt with this. But to just be clear, this is New York, and then we have over here Canada. Okay. And so those are really interesting places. And I might actually add in the idea that I'm working on looking at areas that connect um, on the coastal region of North Carolina and Virginia. So it says Virginia here, all the way down here, but they're marking it from a different time period. And so some parts of what or Virginia here may also be present day North Carolina. And so it's just a little bit further, but if I zoom out, you can see it. So what I want to focus is on the northern side for today. So Pennsylvania and New York are really important areas. I found out that I had family members that were living in Western New York, but were some of the elders that were born in early like 1808 or um what's the other 1750, 1780. They were seeing, it seemed as though a good amount of them, not all of them, were born in Pennsylvania. And then, later on their children and others, the spouses and different members of the family seem to be in Western New York. And I'm like, what in the world? What's going on here? You know? And so what I started to look at and not ignore is this idea of what are the waterways, right? And so as I started to look, and I'm going to zoom in, as I started to look closer at this western part of New York, of course, the New York part, but let me just make sure 'cause I want to make sure that I help everyone see the line. So I'm going to create a line that will move accordingly, that's more visible. This is the New York, Pennsylvania line here, just so that we're clear. Now, Pennsylvania meets Western New York, not right up there, right? So as we get a little bit closer, so we're going to zoom in. Um, when we zoom in, and I'll move the line appropriately. Um, when we zoom in, what we're looking at is this idea of what um, what are the areas and how does Pennsylvania really connect to this? And so it's definitely not coastal. You know, I zoomed in. I mean, there's some water bodies of water on the west side, and then we have some bodies of water on the eastern side, and it doesn't seem like it's very near, right? But let's take a closer look. And I'm going to, I know a little bit about where I want to look. And I think this is the Pennsylvania line. Um, but what I want to look at is the Genesee River. I, after and this came through talking with people, and I was just sharing some of the insight that I knew about what I found about my family members and where they were living. And I was like, well, some of them are here. And then they had a reunion. And these are the places and it was a very descriptive article about this reunion happening in the 1900s, early 1900s. And they were talking about how, who was attending. And it was like people from this town and that town. And I was like, where are these towns? And it just so happened that they were right like in the smack middle, next door to each other. Um, if it was New York City, I might say they were boroughs. That's and maybe even closer than that because these were very small, much smaller. And so I'm just getting a closer. Okay, I found it. All right, so I don't want to lose sight of where we are. So I'm just kind of putting it. So here's one of the main towns here that I was investigating. So I'm just kind of highlighting just for example's sake. So here's some towns that I found family members in. Are you seeing what I'm seeing? Um, and these were, when the reunion hit, these were where people were coming from. And there's a few more. They also came from the Western side too. They married people from the Western side, which I believe they were of um, Native American heritage. Uh, and it's further up. I just don't want to lose the site, but just kind of seeing this, and we have just different people places, and I'm looking for Livingston County. Um, I've even seen Allentown, and Allentown, they oftentimes they would Allegheny is the county in some, depending on the period, but oftentimes they would say Allentown, but there's an Allentown, Pennsylvania also. So you have to be aware of those little crossovers. But Allentown on the New York side is often a county, but they is listed on the census record, but it's associated with these smaller towns. And there's a few more. There's Genesee. proper. And Genesee is actually in Livingston County. So we just don't see the county name here. So are you seeing what I'm seeing? They almost look like they're like and these in 2025, their populations are about some high schools have more people attending there. I know my high school is bigger than some of these towns. Just the student population at the high school is. And so to think of them as small pockets here. But let's go a little bit deeper and look at um, the towns, uh, the waterways. What could be? So I'm going to try to gently zoom in, gently, slowly. And there's this really cool name here. You can see it. I'm going to zoom in a little better, but I want you to see it while you're seeing the towns that I already highlighted from before, right? There's something called the Genesee River, right? Do you see it when you're zoomed out and doing your thing? You don't see it, and you're not really looking for it. Honestly, I wasn't. I mean, I'm in this work. I'm looking for any waterway, but to think of what is the waterway that connects it. And sometimes you can find that waterway by looking at a central highway because it is said, like I've read other historians speak of the fact that many of the highways of today were simply trading pathways. They actually follow the same trading routes that were used um, before highways were even a thing, right? So they were waterways. So oftentimes they follow these routes that follow the waterways that were used for trade. Not that all waterways have the highway connected to them. So bringing that up. So anyway, so this is the Genesee River here, and it's going in. So we're going to zoom in to this Genesee River, and I'm just thinking. Now remember, I started with this um, Pennsylvania, New York, Western New York thing. All right, so I'm gonna zoom in. Help me so I don't lose sight of the Genesee River. Okay, so this is where I am in Western New York, right? And so the first place we'll go north first. Let's go north. And where does it take us? And we're just following, and I'm gonna go so you can see Genesee River right there. It's written, it's visible. You zoom out just a micro inch or whatever the unit would be for zooming out, 2%, and it's all of a sudden hard to see. All right, I think I lost it. I already lost. So that says Baker's Creek, and we need Genesee. We need Genesee. Genesee. There's the Genesee River. See? And so here we are, Genesee River. And so all this way, Allegheny County Road, so we've got to pay attention to what's around these things. So when they come up, and even sometimes in our research, we have to do blind searches. We almost have to say, let's check out if there's a surname that connects to this, and who knows how they find. So some of my other family have married people from regions that are further north. Don't quite understand it yet, right? But we're looking at this Genesee River, and this opens out into Lake Ontario. So I'm just gonna go, so winds this way, winds that way. But it is a a very important body of water. If it passes through, can you imagine how people can get on and off in these places? And this is part of the work that we have to think about in our work, wanting to reach different places and people. And I think we might be did we cross the Canadian border yet? All right, we're almost there. I'm tired. Ooh. All right. When you zoom in, you just can't see. But let me speed this up a little bit. Zoom out and get right. because I actually know where. So here, the Genesee River comes all the way up to this the Lake Ontario right here, and it kind of comes through Rochester, I believe, New York, and so it goes all the way up here. And so Rochester will be another area. I haven't seen it, and I'm not sure that my particular family members went further north, but just to know like where their cluster centered, at, it gives insight into where they were living, but it may also help me understand where they're coming from. And that's a really interesting concept because no matter where we are, what period in our life or time, even 2025, somehow we got here somehow. And even if we think about our own life, like we went to college in one place and then we came back and did here, we worked over there, our grandmother lives there. And so we're understanding different types of dynamics. Um, and but the truth of the matter is that we somehow we weren't always where we are just because we were born. Like somehow someone before us came here. And that's just how things are. Whether it's we moved to another street, I married someone in another town. So now let's follow it south and we'll close out there. So I'm going to zoom out so that we can get south. And I'm very hopeful that I cannot lose the Genesee River when I'm zoom out. All right, so I have a little bit of a marker there, so I know. So now we're at the New York, Pennsylvania line. So we came from Canada and we came all the way back south. And I want to come to the Genesee River. That's, I want to make sure I don't lose that. So that's Little Genesee, but and there's so many other rivers. And so sometimes, which I found it. And so what you find is that these rivers, they get renamed as they go further out. So the Genesee River is here, and I believe it keeps going here. I'm just gonna go, that says something creek. Hmm, creek, right? Um, I just don't want to lose the Genesee River part. Let me just, ooh. Did I just lose my, okay. So let me just zoom out a bit. I knew that was going to happen, but I just had to try my hand at it. So I know we have Genesee River here. Now I just got to zoom in and figure out which way does that name continue. So we have Genesee River. It keeps going south this way. All right. So I'm going to try to zoom out from here. All right, that helped me. And so as we go here, we see how the Genesee River, and it actually crosses over into Pennsylvania. So here's the New York, Pennsylvania line, and I'm just going to scroll up a little bit here. So when I zoom in, it won't be too far gone. And it still holds the name. And so we see the West Branch Genesee River here. And so it crosses over into Pennsylvania. And so for me, and just as an example, like I definitely think this is a huge connector for me thinking about um, the how and the fact that it is not if there's a river that goes straight from um one city to another city, we can't just say, oh, that doesn't matter. They didn't really ride the boat that much, you know. It's a factor. Just as much as we can say from one state to another state, this Genesee River follows and flows directly into Pennsylvania. And so it's not, and so where that flows, business could flow. Necessities may flow. They may come here for, and we have to think about it outside the parameters of our present day needs and expectations of, you know, flowing water in our houses and just access to certain types of business and where businesses would most likely populate. And so we have these kinds of things here, and it keeps going. It actually goes, let's see if I can go. It keeps going much deeper into, I'm just trying to, I have to zoom in to see the name. But as it goes further, um, we get to see how it touches it. And I believe it goes, I actually think I've done this a couple of times. It runs into an ending point, which I think it goes, I think this is the Genesee River here. It goes into where it looks like it kind of stops here. And then you see how the road is named Genesee Mills Road. And so um, these kinds of notation definitely connect to a more historical perspective of how and where these our people may have traveled and had to move around and may have, and we think about how they got there or how the generation before them brought them where they are today. So this is an important perspective to think about. And now I just want to give you, you know, we take the Genesee River from here in Pennsylvania, and it probably goes a little deeper. I'm just um, speeding up a little bit more um, for the sake of time. But when we're thinking about it, this very river goes all the way to Canada. We should be thinking about the Underground Railroad. We should be thinking about Pennsylvania being one of the states which had the city that is known for its abolitionist movements. Um, and all of this is leading through to Canada, right? Is this the exact path? I don't know. But could this be how people, you know, that may not have went all the way to Canada may have stayed here or may have been in Canada and came back this way? They with familiar spaces came back to get other family members. There's just so many narratives to speak of, and we haven't even touched upon Native American history and and perspective on this idea of traveling and moving along these waters, because that is a huge connector for me as it relates to North Carolina, because there is some history that speaks about the forced migration of certain Native American tribes that came specifically to this Genesee River. So thank you for your time. I hope you've gained a little bit of perspective, but just see how I'm zooming out. And so this marker here, and I could put the marker further up here. This is very inland. And, you know, just to drive home the point of how close it really is to the coastal waters. You know, we can go all the way at Lake Erie. There is Lake Ontario. And then we have the Atlantic Ocean. And just to think, if we were to only think of this oceanic body of water as the most important source of information that makes us want to look at maritime anything, is only if we're in the coastal side. Not true. Right? So very inland places, look for your local waterway because people had to congregate and make a way to that space in some shape or fashion. Have a blessed rest of your evening. Thank you for spending some time with us today.